My parents forced me to give up my bedroom for my pregnant sister, saying family sacrifices for family. I simply nodded, went to my new basement room, and pulled out the property deed with my name on it. Mortgage, while they treated me like a tenant, I was about to show them what real ownership means. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from and if this story touches you. Make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I'm Alex Morgan, 29 years old, and I discovered the true meaning of family the day my parents decided I was less important than my sister's comfort. Before I tell you exactly how I reclaimed my space and my dignity, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. I'm curious to see how far this story reaches. It all came crashing down on a rainy Tuesday evening in April, the kind of steady, relentless downpour that makes the world feel small and confined, droplets racing down windowpanes like they're trying to escape. I was sitting at our dining room, table, laptop open, finishing some work when they ambushed me. My parents, Thomas and Caroline Morgan, walked in with my older sister Melissa trailing behind them, one hand resting protectively on her 7-month pregnant belly. They moved as a united front, their faces set with that particular expression I'd come to recognize over the years, the one that meant they'd already made a decision that would inconvenience me, but I was expected to accept it without complaint. "Alex, we need to talk," my father began, his tone already defensive. He was a tall man with graying temples who had mastered the art of making demands sound like reasonable requests. My mother stood beside him, her hands clasped in that nervous way she had when she was about to deliver bad news but expected you to be happy about it. I closed my laptop and braced myself. "What's up?" My mother jumped in, her voice high and cheerful in that artificial way that always set my teeth on edge. "Well, sweetheart, with the baby coming so soon, we've been thinking about space and what's best for everyone." I already knew where this was heading. My bedroom was the largest in the house after the master. It had its own bathroom and a small sitting area by the bay window. I'd specifically chosen it when I moved back in 5 years ago to help them keep the house. It's the house they couldn't afford but refused to downsize from. "Melissa and the baby need more space," my father continued, not quite meeting my eyes. "Your room is the obvious choice with the attached bathroom and extra square footage." Melissa finally spoke up, her voice soft, but with an undercurrent of entitlement that made my skin crawl. "It would really help us out, Alex, just until we find our own place.
Ow.
You know how hard it is with the housing market right now." Same housing market I'd navigated 5 years ago when I'd secretly purchased this very house from the bank. When my parents were 3 months from foreclosure, the same house I'd been paying the mortgage on while they collected my rent and acted like they were doing me a favor letting me live here. "Where exactly am I supposed to go?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. My father cleared his throat. "We've set up the basement. Fixed that dampness issue, brought down your desk. It's actually quite cozy, the basement. With its 7-foot ceilings, tiny windows, and persistent smell of laundry detergent and old carpet. The same basement that flooded every spring when the rain was heavy, like the rain falling outside right now." "When?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "Well, Dan is coming over this weekend to help move Melissa's things in, so." My mother trailed off, glancing toward the ceiling as if the answer might be written there. "So I need to be out by Friday," I finished for her. "It would be helpful," my father confirmed, clearly relieved I wasn't putting up more of a fight. "Family sacrifices for family, Alex. You know that. Family sacrifices for family had been their mantra my entire life. It's the justification for every uneven exchange, every time my needs were deemed less important. It was how they'd convinced me to move back in after college when they were on the verge of losing the house. How they'd persuaded me to take that corporate job I hated instead of pursuing my passion in architectural design. Family sacrifices for family, but somehow I was always the one making the sacrifices." Melissa waddled closer, placing her hand on my shoulder in what was meant to be a gesture of gratitude. "Thank you so much, Alex. This means everything to us. Baby will have the perfect nursery space." I looked at her hand, then up at her face. My sister had always been the golden child. Everything had always come easily to her. Good grades, Without studying, popularity, without effort. A husband with family money who still somehow managed to be perpetually between opportunities. And now, apparently, my bedroom. Sure, I said, standing up and closing my laptop. Family sacrifices for family. The relief on their faces was palpable. They'd expected resistance, maybe even an argument. They didn't know that I'd stopped fighting battles I couldn't win, at least not directly. As I walked toward the stairs, my father called after me. "Oh, and Alex, we might need to adjust your rent contribution, the baby coming and all the new expenses." I paused on the first step, not turning around. "Of course," I said, my voice revealing nothing of the cold resolve forming in my chest. "We'll talk about it later." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. In my soon-to-be former bedroom, I closed the door and leaned against it, taking deep breaths. The room that had been my sanctuary, my one demand when I'd agreed to move back home to help out. The room I'd remodeled with my own money, installing the custom bookshelves that now housed Melissa's collection of unread bestsellers and decorative trinkets. I walked to my closet, pushed aside the hanging clothes, and knelt down to unlock the small safe hidden in the back corner. Inside, nestled among important documents and a modest emergency cash fund, was a blue folder. I pulled it out and opened it, though I didn't need to. I knew exactly what it contained. The deed to 1487 Oakwood Drive, the mortgage papers, bank transfer receipts, all in my name. 5 years ago, when my parents called me in a panic about the foreclosure notice, I'd come running. I always did. I was fresh out of graduate school with student loans and a new job, but I had excellent credit and a signing bonus. Instead of telling my parents I would help with payments, I went directly to the bank. I negotiated with them to buy the house outright, assuming the remaining mortgage under my name. I never told my parents. At the time, I told myself it was to spare their pride, that I was protecting them from the humiliation of knowing they'd lost their home and their youngest child had to save them. Convinced myself it was the kind and decent thing to do. The truth was simpler and far more painful. I knew that if they realized I owned the house, the dynamic would shift. They would feel beholden to me instead of the other way around. And that wasn't how our family worked. In our family, I was the giver. They were the takers. That was the natural order of things, established long before I was old enough to question it. So I moved in, paid the mortgage, and let them charge me rent on top of it. I watched them use that money for vacations I wasn't invited on, for gifts for Melissa and her husband, for remodeling projects I didn't have a say in. All while I worked 60-hour weeks at a job that slowly drained my soul. I sat on my bed, soon to be Melissa's bed, clutching the folder to my chest. A strange calm descended over me, the kind that comes with absolute clarity. This wasn't just about a bedroom. This was about 5 years of silent sacrifice. It's about a lifetime of being the family's safety net while being treated like an inconvenient houseguest. I reached for my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the name I was looking for, Diana Chen. She had been my real estate lawyer when I purchased the house. She was brilliant, methodical, and most importantly, she had no connection to my family. I hesitated only a moment before pressing the call button. "Diana Chen," she answered on the third ring, her voice crisp and professional. "Diana, it's Alex Morgan," I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "I need your help with something important. How soon can we meet?" Diana's office was on the 12th floor of a gleaming downtown building, all glass and polished metal. It was a far cry from the basement I'd spent the last 2 days moving my belongings into. Ducking to avoid the low-hanging pipes and wiping away the moisture that seemed to seep through the concrete walls, despite my father's insistence that he'd fixed the dampness issue. Diana greeted me with a firm handshake and gestured to the chair across from her desk. She hadn't changed much in the 5 years since she'd helped me purchase my parents' house, still impeccably dressed. Her dark hair cut in a precise bob, her eyes sharp and assessing. "Alex," she said once we were seated, "what can I help you with today?" For the next hour, I laid out the situation in detail. I showed her the deed, the mortgage statements, the payment records, all meticulously organized. I explained how I'd been paying for the house while my parents collected rent from me, how they just displaced me to the basement for my pregnant sister, how they were now suggesting my rent should increase to cover the new baby's expenses. Diana listened without interruption, occasionally making notes. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair, studying me with an intensity that made me slightly uncomfortable. "Let me make sure I understand correctly," she said. "You own this house legally. It is your property. You've been paying the mortgage, insurance, and property taxes for 5 years. Your parents and sister have been living there rent-free while simultaneously charging you rent to live in your own house. And now they've relegated you to the basement to make room for your sister and her unborn child?" When she put it like that, laid out in her precise, logical manner, the absurdity of my situation hit me with full force. "Yes," I said, my voice smaller than I intended. "That's exactly right." Diana was silent for a moment, tapping her pen against her legal pad. "Alex, forgive me for asking, but why have you allowed this arrangement to continue for so long?" It was the question I'd been avoiding asking myself. The big why that lurked beneath every interaction with my family, every silent agreement too. Put their needs before my own. "They're my family," I said weakly, but even to my own ears, it sounded hollow. Diana nodded, not unkindly. "I understand family loyalty, but this goes beyond loyalty, Alex. This is exploitation." The word hung in the air between us. Exploitation. It was harsh and clinical, but undeniably accurate. "What are my options?" I asked, straightening in my chair. "Legally speaking?" "Well, you have several," Diana said, shifting into full lawyer mode. "The house is yours. You can sell it. You can evict them. You can formalize a proper rental agreement with market rate rent. You hold all the cards here, Alex? All the cards." For someone who had spent their entire life being dealt a weak hand by the people who were supposed to protect me, the concept was almost dizzying. "I don't want to make them homeless," I said, the programmed response coming automatically. "They're still my parents." "I'm not suggesting you do," Diana replied. "But there's a middle ground between allowing yourself to be taken advantage of and throwing your family out on the street." She pulled out a legal pad and began outlining a strategy: formal revelation of ownership, a structured rental agreement, clear boundaries and expectations. It was comprehensive, fair, and completely terrifying. "Take some time to think about it," Diana said, sensing my hesitation. "This is a significant step. But remember, Alex, setting healthy boundaries isn't just good for you. Sometimes it's the only way to build a sustainable relationship with family members who have become accustomed to taking more than they give." I left Diana's office with a folder full of options and a head full of doubt. The rain had stopped, but the sky remained heavy with clouds, mirroring my mood. As I walked to my car, my phone buzzed with a text message from my mother. "Your father and I noticed you took some of your furniture to storage instead of the basement. We were thinking Melissa could use your dresser for the baby's things since you won't have room for it downstairs anyway. So let me know when you can help move it to her room." Not a question, not even a request. Just another assumption that I would comply, would sacrifice, would give until there was nothing left. Something inside me shifted, like a key turning in a lock. The doubt that had clouded my thoughts after leaving Diana's office evaporated, replaced by a clarity I hadn't felt in years. I didn't respond to the text. Instead, I called Diana. "I've made my decision," I said when she answered. "I want to move forward with your plan." The dominoes began to fall the very next day. I had just settled into my new basement apartment. A generous term for what was essentially a partially finished cellar with my bed crammed into one corner and my desk in another. The damp smell was stronger after yesterday's rain, and I could hear the constant footsteps above as Melissa and my mother rearranged my former bedroom, discussing paint colors and nursery themes as if I'd never existed in the space. My phone rang. It was Mr. Patel from the property management company that handled the billing for utilities and property taxes. Diana had made the calls that morning, informing all relevant parties that correspondence should now come directly to me, rather than my parents. "Mr. Morgan," he began, sounding confused. I've just received some unusual instructions regarding your property at 1487 Oakwood Drive. There seems to be some confusion about the ownership status. There's no confusion, Mr. Patel, I replied, calmly. I am the legal owner of the property. I've been the owner for 5 years. My parents have been handling the correspondence until now, but going forward, everything should come directly to me. I see, he said, still sounding uncertain. Well, in that case, there are several matters that require your attention. Seems there are some outstanding water bills that haven't been paid, and the property tax installment for this quarter is coming due next week. Of course, there were outstanding bills. The rent I paid every month was supposed to cover utilities. And property taxes. At least that's what my parents had always told me. Apparently, they'd been diverting that money elsewhere. Send me everything, I said. I'll take care of it. I had just hung up when I heard heavy footsteps on the basement stairs. My father appeared, his face flushed with anger. My mother, right behind him, looking pale and shaken. What the hell did you do? Demanded, waving his phone in my face. I just got a call from the utility company saying they can't discuss our account with me because I'm not the property owner. I remained seated at my desk, forcing him to loom over me. It was a power move he'd used my entire life using. His height to intimidate, to make himself larger than life. It had always worked before. It wouldn't work today. I didn't do anything, I said, my voice level. I simply instructed them to direct communication to the actual property owner, which is me. The silence that followed was deafening. My mother's hand flew to her throat, a dramatic gesture she'd perfected over years of family confrontations. What are you talking about? My father finally managed, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out the blue folder. I placed it on the desk between us and opened it, revealing the deed with my name clearly printed on it. I've owned this house for 5 years, I said. When you were about to lose it to foreclosure, I didn't just help with payments like I told you. I bought it outright. I've been paying the mortgage, the insurance, and apparently the utilities, and property taxes that my rent was supposedly covering. My mother sank down onto the bottom step of the stairs, her legs seemingly unable to support her. That's not possible, she whispered. We would have known. Would you? I asked, genuinely curious. You signed the papers. Did you even read them? Or did you just see a solution to your problem and grab it without questioning? My father's face had gone from red to white, his eyes fixed on the documents before him. He reached out as if to take the folder, but I smoothly closed it and returned it to my drawer. This is some kind of mistake, he said, but there was no conviction in his voice. Or a trick. You can't just buy someone's house without them knowing. I didn't buy someone's house, I corrected him. I bought a house that was about to be bank property. You had already lost it, Dad. I just didn't tell you. Why? My mother asked, tears welling in her eyes. The manipulation was so familiar, it almost made me laugh. Why would you keep this from us? We're your parents. Because I knew exactly how you would react, I said. Not with gratitude, not with a recognition that your child had saved you from homelessness. But with exactly what I'm seeing now, outrage that I had the audacity to help in a way that gave me any power in this relationship. My father's shock was beginning to give way to calculation. I could see it in his eyes, the gears turning, looking for leverage, for a way to turn this revelation to his advantage. Well, he said, his voice taking on a conciliatory tone that immediately put me on alert, I suppose we should thank you then, for helping the family in our time of need. That was very generous of you, it was, I agreed. I've continued. To be generous, I've let you live here rent-free, while charging me to live in my own house. I've paid for renovations and repairs without complaint. I've been the perfect tenant in a house that I own. My mother stood up, composing herself. Sweetheart, if this is about the bedroom situation, we can reconsider. Perhaps Melissa could make do with the guest room instead. It was so transparent, so predictable. The immediate pivot to appeasement when confrontation failed, the minimal concession offered as if it addressed the core issue. This isn't about the bedroom, I said. Though being displaced to the basement of my own home was certainly the wake-up call I needed. This is about respect. It's about honesty. About family actually meaning something beyond who can be exploited for the benefit of everyone else? No one is exploiting you, my father protested, but the words rang hollow even to him. I could tell. We're a family. We help each other. Do we? I asked. When was the last time anyone in this family helped me? I was working 60-hour weeks and came home to find you'd invited guests over and expected me to cook for them. When Melissa needed a new car, and somehow my savings were the obvious solution? When was I anything but the family piggy bank? The silence that followed was answer enough. I've had a rental agreement drawn up, I said, pulling another document from my drawer. It outlines a fair market rent for this property, with clear terms about who is responsible for what. If you choose to stay, you'll need to sign it. If not, I'll give you 60 days to find alternative arrangements. My father snatched the document from my hand, his face contorted with a mixture of anger and disbelief. You can't be serious. You would charge your own parents rent, your pregnant sister. I've been paying rent to live in my own house for 5 years, I reminded him. And yes, I would charge my sister rent. Her pregnancy doesn't entitle her to free housing any more than my hard work entitled me to be. I was treated like a second-class citizen in this family. My mother was crying now, real tears that might have moved me once. How can you be so cold, so calculating? This isn't how we raised you. You're right, I agreed. You raised me to give without question, to sacrifice without recognition, to put myself last in every equation. I've decided I don't like that version of myself very much. I stood up then, forcing my father to take a step back. You have until tomorrow to decide. Sign the agreement and stay under the new terms, or start looking for somewhere else to live. Either way, I'll be moving back upstairs to the master bedroom. It seems fitting that the owner of the house should have the largest room, don't you? Think. They left the basement in stunned silence, my father clutching the rental agreement like it was a snake that might bite him. I heard them whispering furiously as they climbed the stairs, no doubt already strategizing how to regain the upper hand. For the first time in 5 years, perhaps in my entire life, I wasn't worried about their reaction. I wasn't calculating how to minimize the fallout or preparing apologies for standing up for myself. I was simply at peace with my decision, come what may. The storm had broken, and whatever grew in its aftermath would at least be rooted in truth. The next morning, I woke up with a strange sense of lightness. Despite the low ceiling of the basement and the chill that seeped through the concrete walls, I felt as if a weight had been lifted. The constant pressure that had lived between my shoulder blades for years, the physical manifestation of being perpetually taken for granted, had eased. I showered in the tiny basement bathroom where the water pressure alternated between a trickle and a painful blast without warning. As I dressed for work, I could hear movement upstairs. The heavy footsteps of my father pacing, the hushed, urgent tones of my mother on the phone, the occasional sound of Melissa's voice rising in indignation. They were rallying the troops. I'd expected nothing less. I climbed the basement stairs and emerged into the kitchen. The conversation stopped abruptly. My mother was at the counter, phone pressed to her ear. My father sat at the table, the rental agreement spread out before him, his reading glasses perched on his nose. Melissa was nowhere to be seen. Morning, I said, heading for the coffee pot. Nobody responded. I poured myself a cup and leaned against the counter, facing them directly. My mother muttered something into the phone and hung up. We need to talk about this situation, my father said, taking off his glasses and pinching the bridge of his nose, his classic gesture of long-suffering patience. I agree, I replied, taking a sip of coffee. Have you made your decision? My mother swooped in, her voice honeyed with forced understanding. Honey, we've been thinking about what you said. We understand that you feel underappreciated, and maybe we haven't been as clear as we should have been about how much we value everything you do for this family. I waited. The pivot was coming. But this, my father gestured to the agreement. This is an overreaction. We're your parents, Alex. We changed your diapers. We put you through college. We've supported you your entire life. And now you want to treat us like tenants? There it was, the familiar guilt trip, the emotional ledger, where my debt to them could never be repaid, while their debt to me didn't even merit acknowledgement. I'm not treating you like tenants, I corrected him. I'm treating you like adults who understand that housing costs money, that property has value, and that relationships should be built on honesty and mutual respect. But the terms in this agreement, my mother protested. They're so formal, so cold. They're standard, I replied. In fact, they're quite generous compared to market rates. I've included utilities in the base rent, which most landlords wouldn't do. Landlords, my father repeated, spitting the word like it tasted bad. Listen to yourself, Alex. We're talking about your sister, who's about to have a baby. Your flesh and blood. Yes. My sister, who's married to a man whose family has a vacation home in Aspen that sits empty most of the year, I pointed out. Somehow they can afford luxury ski trips, but not their own apartment. Interesting, isn't it? My mother's face flushed. Brad's going through a career transition. Brad has been going through a career transition for the 3 years they've been married, I interrupted. Meanwhile, Melissa hasn't worked since the wedding. Despite her marketing degree and the connections from her previous job, she's pregnant, my mother exclaimed, as if this explained years of financial dependence. She's been pregnant for 7 months, I countered. What's the excuse for the other 29? My father stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. This is exactly what I'm talking about. It's cold, calculating attitude. Where is your compassion? Here. Sense of family duty? I set my coffee cup down carefully, maintaining my composure. My compassion and sense of duty have been subsidizing this household for 5 years. They've been paying for renovations I didn't approve and vacations I wasn't invited on. They've been funding Melissa's career transition and Brad's golf club. Membership, that's not fair, my mother protested. No, it hasn't been fair, I agreed. But it's going to be fair moving forward. Either sign the agreement or start packing. My father's face darkened. You would really throw your own family out on the street? Your pregnant sister? I would expect my family to respect my property and my boundaries, I clarified, just as I would respect theirs. And again, Melissa and Brad have options. Many, many options that don't involve exploiting my generosity. The kitchen fell silent. My phone buzzed with a reminder I had a meeting in an hour. I have to get to work, I said, rinsing my cup in the sink. The agreement requires your signatures by 6 p.m. today. After that, I'll assume you're choosing the 60-day notice option. I walked toward the door, then paused. Oh, and I'll be moving my things back upstairs to the master bedroom this evening. You and Mom should start moving your belongings. To the guest room, Dad. Or Melissa and Brad can take the guest room, and you can keep your current room. That's entirely up to you to sort out. The explosion came as I reached for my car keys on the hook by the door. You ungrateful little, my father began, his voice rising to a shout before my mother cut him off with a hand on his arm. How dare you, he continued, shaking off her restraining touch. After everything we've done for you. After raising you, feeding you, clothing you, giving you a home, giving me a home, I repeated, turning back to face him. You mean the home I saved from foreclosure? The home I've been paying for while you pretended it was still yours? That home? We gave you life. He thundered, his face mottled with rage. You owe us everything. And there it was, the raw, ugly truth at the heart of our family dynamic. In his mind and their minds, my very existence was a debt I could never repay. Being their child wasn't a gift of love. It was a transaction that placed me forever in their debt. I owe you respect as my parents, I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. I owe you gratitude for raising me. I do not owe you unlimited financial support or the deed to my house. I do not owe you the right to treat me as less than Melissa. I do not owe you my dignity. I opened the door. 6 p.m. Your decision. The workday passed in a blur. I moved through meetings and spreadsheets on autopilot, my mind continuously circling back to the confrontation that morning and the decision that awaited me at home. Around noon, the text started, from my mother, please call me. We need to talk privately. From Melissa, how could you do this to us, to my baby? From an unknown number that I recognized as Brad's. Real classy bro. Threatening to evict a pregnant woman, you must be so proud. I didn't respond to any of them. There was nothing to say that hadn't already been said. At 5:30 p.m., I pulled into the driveway of my house, and sat in the car for a moment, gathering my strength. There were more cars than usual parked along the street. I recognized Melissa's small SUV, Brad's impractically expensive sports car, another sedan I didn't immediately place. They had called in reinforcements. Of course they had. I walked into an ambush. Seated in my living room, arranged like a tribunal, were my parents, Melissa and Brad. And the final strategic piece, my Aunt Patricia, my mother's older sister. Aunt Patricia had always played the role of family matriarch, the voice of moral authority. She was a widow with grown children, financially comfortable from her late husband's insurance policy, and absolutely convinced of her own wisdom in all matters. "Alex," she said as I entered, her voice heavy with disappointment, "sit down. We need to have a family discussion." I remained standing. "Hello, Aunt Patricia. I wasn't expecting you." "Clearly," she replied. "Your mother called me very upset." She explained the situation. "Did she explain the whole situation?" I asked. "Or just the parts that paint me as the villain?" Patricia's lips thinned. "She told me that you've somehow gotten it into your head that you own this house, and you're threatening to evict your own family if they don't pay you rent." "That's not somehow in my head," I corrected her. "A legal fact documented by the property deed and mortgage, which are in my name. And yes, I'm asking them to either pay fair market rent or find alternative housing within 60 days, which is extremely generous in eviction terms." "Eviction," my mother cried, right on cue. "Listen to how cold he sounds, Patricia. We're strangers, not his own flesh and blood." Aunt Patricia fixed me with the stern look that had cowed me as a child. "Young man, I don't know what's gotten into you, but this is not how we raised you to behave. Family supports family, period." "I agree," I said. "Which is why I've been supporting this entire household financially for 5 years, while being treated like an unwelcome guest. Which is why I kept quiet when they charged me rent to live in my own house. Which is why I said nothing when they decided I should live in the basement so Melissa could have my room." Brad snorted. "Oh, please. You make it sound like you're some kind of martyr. You lived here because it was convenient for you. Cheap rent, home-cooked meals, laundry service. You had it made." I turned to look at him, really look at him for perhaps the first time. Brad Donovan, with his carefully tousled hair and designer casual clothes. Brad, who had never held a job for more than 6 months, but always had the latest iPhone. Brad, who had married my sister and somehow become another dependent in my unwitting financial portfolio. "Cheap rent?" I repeated. "I've been paying the entire mortgage, plus an additional rent on top of that. I've been covering property taxes, insurance, and utilities. I've paid for repairs and renovations. My cheap rent has been subsidizing." "Your lifestyle, Brad. Maybe you should think about that before you join a conversation about financial responsibility." Brad's face flushed, but he had no retort. Financial details had never been his strong suit. Why would they be, when others always picked up the tab? Melissa placed her hand protectively over her pregnant belly, a gesture I'd noticed she deployed strategically whenever she felt challenged. "This stress isn't good for the baby, Alex. How can you be so selfish?" "That's exactly what I've been wondering for years," I replied. "How can all of you be so selfish, so blind to the one-sided nature of our relationship?" My father, who had been uncharacteristically quiet until now, finally spoke up. "Enough of this back and forth. We're getting nowhere." He pushed a piece of paper across the coffee table toward me. "We've drafted a counter-proposal." Picked it up, scanning the handwritten points quickly. It was breathtaking in its audacity. They would acknowledge my ownership of the house, but in exchange, I would continue to pay the mortgage, taxes, and insurance, move back to the basement, permanently charge them only a symbolic rent of $100 per month, agree never to sell the house without family consensus, include the property in my will. Leaving it to Melissa and her children, I looked up from the paper, meeting my father's gaze. He was watching me with the smug expectation of someone who believes they've crafted an irrefutable argument. This was his specialty, creating compromises that gave the appearance of concession while actually demanding even more than before. "This isn't a counter-proposal," I said, placing the paper back on the table. "This is a wish list that completely ignores the reality of property ownership. It acknowledges your technical ownership, my father argued. While preserving the family nature of the home, my ownership isn't technical, I replied. Legal and financial, I paid for this house. I continue to pay for this house. And this proposal essentially asks me to keep doing that forever, while giving up my right to live in the best room of my own home and promising never to sell my own property. It's a family home, my mother interjected. It's an asset that I purchased, I corrected her. One that you lost through financial mismanagement and that I rescued with my own money and credit. Aunt Patricia made a disapproving noise. Listen to yourself, Alex. Asset purchased. You sound like a banker, not a family member. Turned to her, suddenly tired of the performative moral outrage. Aunt Patricia, did you pay off Uncle Robert's medical bills after he died? She straightened, caught off guard by the change in topic. Well, yes, but that's different. And when Cousin Emily needed help with her college tuition, did you provide it? Of course I did. She's my daughter. And did you expect to be paid back for either of those things? She frowned. But those were gifts. Family helping family in times of need. Exactly, I said. And I helped my family in their time of need by buying this house when they were about to lose it. That was my gift, a substantial one, worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. But gifts don't create eternal obligations. They don't entitle the recipients to demand more and more without end. I looked around the room, making eye contact with each of them. But the rent agreement stands as written. If you don't want to sign it, that's your choice. But my generosity has reached its limit. So that's it? Fred said, his voice thick with disdain. Your pregnant sister either pays up or gets thrown out on the street. Real family values there, Alex. I'd had enough. My pregnant sister and her chronically unemployed husband have a multitude of options that don't involve emotional blackmail. You could move in with your parents, Brad? I hear their Aspen house is lovely this time of year. You could accept the generous rental. Terms I'm offering, which are well below market rate. You could get jobs and pay for housing like most adults do. But what you cannot do is continue to treat me like a bottomless resource to be drained for your convenience. The room fell silent. For the first time, I saw uncertainty flicker across their faces. Perhaps it was finally sinking in that I was serious. The easy Mark they'd been exploiting for years had finally wised up and was setting boundaries that couldn't be manipulated or crossed. The deadline is 6 p.m., I said, checking my watch. That's in 15 minutes. I'll be upstairs moving my things into the master bedroom. If you want to sign the agreement, bring it up to me. Otherwise, I'll expect you to be out within 60 days. As I climbed the stairs, I heard the furious whispering begin behind me. The blame shifting, the strategizing. The disbelief that their carefully constructed system of exploitation was crumbling around them. I entered what had been my parents' bedroom for as long as I could remember. It was spacious, with large windows that overlooked the backyard garden I'd paid to have landscaped 2 summers ago. The furniture was new, purchased with my rent. Money, no doubt. I ran my hand over the plush comforter, the solid oak dresser, the matching nightstands. All of it bought with my money, yet I'd never been allowed to enjoy any of it. Until now. I began methodically removing my parents' belongings from the closet, carefully placing their clothes on the bed. I emptied the dresser drawers, stacked the contents neatly. I removed the pictures from the walls, the trinkets from the surfaces, working with the calm precision of someone executing a long-planned operation. Because in a way I was. This moment had been building for 5 years, perhaps for my entire life. The moment when I finally stopped accepting scraps from the table and claimed my rightful place. I heard footsteps on the stairs. Then my father appeared in the doorway. He looked older somehow, diminished. The rental agreement was clutched in his hand. We'll sign, he said, the words clearly painful for him to utter. But I want you to know that this changes everything, Alex. This isn't how family treats family. I took the agreement from him, verifying that all the required signatures were there. His, my mother's, even Melissa and Brad's scrawls at the bottom of the page. You're right about one thing, Dad, I said, meeting his gaze steadily. This does change everything, but not in the way you think. This is the beginning of a healthier relationship, one based on honesty and respect, rather than exploitation and guilt. He shook his head, his expression a mixture of anger and bewilderment. "I don't even recognize you anymore." As he turned to leave, I realized that was perhaps the most honest thing he'd said to me in years. He didn't recognize me, because for the first time, I was refusing to play the role they'd assigned me. I was stepping out of the box they'd kept me in for so long. It felt like breathing fresh air after a lifetime underground. That night I slept in the master bedroom of my house for the first time. The mattress was more comfortable than I'd imagined, the room quieter than the basement, with its constant mechanical hums and creaks. I lay awake for a while, expecting to feel guilt or doubt about my decision. Instead, I felt only peace. Relief of finally being honest with them and with myself. The satisfaction of setting boundaries that would protect my well-being. The quiet pride of standing up for my own worth after years of letting others determine my value. As I drifted off to sleep, I realized something profound. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for others and for yourself is to stop enabling patterns that harm everyone involved. Sometimes love looks like firm boundaries and uncomfortable truths. Sometimes love looks exactly like a rental agreement with your family's signatures at the bottom.